Welcome to Stoughton Spotlight. I'm your host, Jeffrey Pickette. We're back with our Conversations with the Candidates series. And on this episode, I'm joined by Bob O'Regan, who is the current chairman of the Stoughton Board of Selectmen. He's up for re-election this campaign cycle, the April 2018 town election, where there are 4 candidates, including Bob, who are running for 2 seats on the Board of Selectmen. I'll be sitting down with all the candidates for the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, the 2 contested races in this election cycle. So let's officially welcome Bob to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And so you're here now, and a lot has gone on the last few months, and you find yourself chair of the Board of Selectmen now. And so let's just walk through, in the last few months since becoming chair, what you've set to do on the board, to get things going again with a very new look board with 3 members replaced due to the recall election.
Well, the first challenge was to inform the new members of the business of the town that was pending. Some of it in the public domain, and if you look at the agendas, a lot of it were executive session materials with negotiations or other things. And then we were dealing with the budget and the finances of the town, and if you look at what was going on, we tried to alternate, initially through December, addressing financial budgetary issues with introducing the new members to various aspects of the government. And then through January into the big middle of February, it was all budget all the time, pretty much. And now we're looking at some of the other priorities that have existed to focus on those and get them moving. We can get particular, but in general, it's many of the same topics that we've talked about before to make progress on. One of the disappointments that had existed was that the Redevelopment Authority had done a pretty remarkable job putting together a downtown renewal plan that was submitted to the selectmen on December, I want to say 16th, 2016. We got it, and it never made it to a meeting of the board to look at. So we undertook to get that in front of the board, to schedule how to deal with it, to begin to develop strategies to address the priorities that the town has had with the downtown. We took a very hard look at the facilities. So we have a facilities master plan committee. Dick Fitzgerald is the chairman. He's just done a tremendous job, not to take anything away from the other members of the committee, but Dick really brought into focus some of the things we needed to pay attention to, and all of the new members were committed to making sure that our facilities are kept up. A primary job that we have as selectmen is stewards for the physical plant of the town. So one of the first things we did was on a Saturday took tours of several of the buildings that we have to get an understanding of what we need to do from the facilities master plan. And we met with the facilities master plan folks, worked with the town's facilities manager to understand what we need to do, both in terms of operating expenditures, maintenance, and also catching up for things that weren't done to address those. Another priority has been to try to make town meeting work better. So the board is composed of people who either are or have been members of town meeting. Some of us have, I'll use the word, suffered through 12 town meeting sessions, and one of the things I've tried to do is have the board appreciate that the agenda for town meeting comes from the Board of Selectmen, and there are 2 ways for town meeting's business to be set. One is the Board of Selectmen prepares articles for the warrant, and then citizens can always petition. The majority of articles come from the Board of Selectmen. So we wanted to organize how those are put together. We wanted to have them focused and directed, and we've been working, all of us, very hard to present the business to town meeting in an organized, streamlined fashion. So instead of 12 nights, which I think my first year on the board, we had 88 town meeting articles, and I want to say it was a 12-night. It was just a marathon. A lot of the time, spent trying to back up and fill in or organize what was happening. So members of our board have been working hard to put the town's business in order, have the warrant articles, organize the information presented, so when things work through FinCom and work through the town committees, the priorities identified, the information is available, and town meeting works smoother. And that involved working closely with the chairs of the Finance Committee and Redevelopment Authority and many others to focus the work of the town to get us to town meeting, because we have some priorities to advance. And, you know, in a nutshell, that's been the last 2.5 months.
It's certainly been busy. There's been a lot of meetings. One thing I'd like to discuss, and it seems to always come up in conversations like these and shows where we're interviewing candidates, it seems to be an annual topic, is town manager. And actually, we're filming February 28th, and last night's Board of Selectmen's meeting, you discussed really in depth for the first time looking at the next permanent town manager. So first, I'd like to backtrack, and I'd like to talk interim town manager. And I'd like to talk the decision to switch from Stephen Astos, whose contract had expired December 31st, and to go with Mark Tisdale, who is the town engineer. So I'd like just to kind of go into that decision-making process to go from one interim to the other before the permanent is selected. And then we can talk more along the lines of finding the next permanent town manager.
Well, we had someone who'd been named interim town manager whose contract was set to expire. So a decision had to be made by a board, 3 members of whom were not sitting when that appointment was made. The board decided that they would have an open application process. The applications that we received, were received. They were vetted. The interview occurred, and the selection was made. That was the process. I don't know what else.
Sure. You served with Mr. Anastos, you know him, and how would you say his performance as interim town manager, performing in that duty for the several months he was in the corner office, so to speak?
I think I think he did a good job. I think he was in a difficult position in terms of when the placement occurred, how the placement occurred, what he had to deal with. I think also having that job while a recall election was going on created some dynamics that had to have been difficult for him to deal with, and I think he did the best that he could, and the town is better for what he did.
So moving on to Mark Tisdale, who's the current interim town manager, no easy task. You asked him to basically go through the budget again in a very short amount of time, and he did it, and he came back with the request to pare some things down. How's he done so far in being the interim town manager?
I think he's done better than anyone could have expected of anyone in that situation. So I will say that there were a bunch of challenges with respect to the budget preparation. 3 new members of the board, because of the change in the permanent to one interim, things that could have, would have, should have happened between the board and the manager's position, such as budget preparation directives, which we've done in the past, capital expenditure directives. So in the past we've said, come and give us capital expenditures that might be, say, 4% of the levy, or other steps like that, level services funding, things like that. None of those steps happened leading up to December. And then when we received our actual budget at the beginning of January, we had not seen yet, even though it had been asked for, we had not seen yet the detailed departmental breakdown. And that's not to criticize what happened, because it was a difficult environment to work in. So that's what we got, and the figures for how far off balance were remarkable. So we went through December and January, pretty much 2 meetings a week, long meetings well past 10 or 11 o'clock, to drill down into the budgets to understand what was going on. And I think with the goal to provide level service, even though the cost of operating the town go up like all of our homes, and our revenue was not keeping up with the increasing costs. So that's in essence what the process was. And on the management side, what the selectmen typically do is to look at the management and the department heads. It's a great team of department heads. Say to them, we don't have as much money as we would like. And that's when we committed the budget proposal to the manager with directions to adjust the budget to bring us in line to submit a balanced budget. One of the things, to get back to town meeting, one of the things that has happened in town meeting and with the finance committee in particular historically is that selectmen have not always submitted a balanced budget to the finance committee, and our goal was to be responsible and submit a balanced budget to town meeting based on the revenue figures we had. We thought we were. We still think that the budget will be in balance when the revenue figures get solidified. On paper, it's about $249,000 off, but based on some additional numbers that come in later, those figures should go up, and we should have either balanced or a slight surplus over what we submitted. And the other thing we have done is identified items that we couldn't do in the balanced budget as we submitted it. And the phrase I'll use is add backs, where we say, once we know what additional revenue we may have, these are the add backs that we will look at. Now, what we're going to do probably in the middle of March, once we have better revenue figures, is develop our add back philosophy so that we can present FinCom in town meeting with an idea. Just for example, if there's $100,000 in revenue that we did not anticipate, this is what we'll ask to happen with that $100,000.
Well, let's just hypothetically speaking, being clear that we don't know what the figures are going to be yet. What's on the top of your priority list for an add back if there happened to be extra money when the revenues came in?
Well, one of the things that was cut was an assistant director in the recreation department. So that will have a major impact in programming for families, particularly children, in the summer months. That's a quality of life issue for the town. A relatively modest amount, I want to say $53,000 or $55,000. We can do more in police and fire and DPW if we have more money to work with, so those are priorities. One thing we know is that once and forgetting who the occupant of the office may have been, what we learned is that when you had a professional human resources person to help with hiring, deal with issues that came up, if you look at the litigation report at the end of the town meeting books, right? So there's a litigation report. Town meeting is required to get a list of all the cases and things going on. You will see, compared to where we were, say, 7 years ago when we didn't have a human resources professional, the number of employment claims that the town has to deal with. And then the way we're able to service our employees better. We've got a large employee workforce. There's no employee workforce I can think of this size that doesn't have a human resources professional to work with benefits, to work with hiring, to work with workplace issues. So that would be a priority.
What is the status right now in that office? We know that the previous human resources director has left, another town now. What is the status of where that office stands right now?
Well, the position that was vacated hasn't been filled. The person who had been working in that office has stepped in to fill that role. One of the things we would want to look at is at the assistant town manager level, because I believe the previous manager had this, Mr. Anastas had this, I think this is the view that the board has, is that the talent mix that we need and the work that we need to do, a full-time HR director to do nothing but HR may be more capacity than we can use. But blending that in with an assistant town manager role who can work with finance, who can work with building projects, who can work with the host of things that the town has going on and assist the manager, might be where we would go. So we would convert what was the HR position to a combination HR assistant town manager. and allow that person to help with the employment issues, but also so many other things that we need to do.
And is that something that other towns are doing, that you'd be looking, reason I ask that is you'd be looking at a pool of candidates that would have had that job experience and wouldn't be asking somebody who's just an HR person to maybe reach for a position where they're learning about being a town manager, or are there other towns that have this kind of dual role?
There are other towns that have this dual role, and you just don't know what what gem you're going to get if you put it out there. My philosophy is people aren't one-dimensional, right? So there's many assets that people have that don't present themselves. So you may have somebody who is now an assistant town manager who may have been an HR director before. You may have somebody who's a town manager in a smaller town who would have all of the HR responsibilities, who would move up to Stoughton and take that position. So the steps would be, if and when we're able to have that position funded, and I'm not sure we'll be able to get it, would be to do a job description and go out. I think on police and fire, some of the add-backs would be police and fire, because we need to do better in staffing both of those departments. We've worked hard to do it, and there were some cutbacks there, and the goal would be to do some infill there with add-backs.
Let's go on to the permanent town manager, and now I imagine the process isn't going to be completed by the time the election takes place, but where will we be by the time the election takes place?
In the perfect world we don't live in, so what we did at last night's board meeting was to direct the preparation of an RFP, a request for proposals, for a consultant to help us recruit and screen applicants for the town manager. I expect the RFP will have been issued. It's possible that by the election time, all of the responses to the RFP will be in. It's possible, but not likely, that a consulting firm will have been selected. Working with the consulting firm, we'll develop a strategy for the hiring process, getting it out. One of the things that the board needs to decide is the actual process for going through the selection. Do we want a citizens evaluation committee for the candidates? Do we want to have department heads involved, which I think the answer to both questions is yes. And the consultant will help us frame that. The next question the board has to decide is the level of involvement the board will have in the screening. There are basically two different approaches. One is the board is involved in everything, and the other, the board waits for finalists to be screened in. And the board will have to decide as a policy matter which way to go. I would anticipate all of that could be done, by the time town meeting starts, so that during town meeting the consultant will be receiving, processing, and grading applications, and then the interview process will happen, and the goal is to have a town manager selected and in office as to the start of the fiscal year.
And then what type
That's July 1st.
Sure. What type of town manager are you looking for? You were part of the last hiring process, and sitting on the board then. What type of candidate are you looking for?
The best one we can find, is that?
Sure. Yeah.
You want more than that?
Are you willing to go outside the box of somebody who is just been a town manager? Are you looking to, if somebody applied from the business community or from another field, maybe a CEO somewhere else, but thinks they have the skills that are applicable that could translate? Are you willing to kind of look at everything? Are you going, we need the professional, quote unquote, town manager?
So the way I see, this is just me, the way I see us is defining, well, the charter is the job description. The town charter identifies what the town manager is supposed to do within government. And then I think there's a catch-all, and anything else the Board of Selectmen wants the town manager to do. I believe what we will need to do is define the skill and talent set that the board believes would fill the description under the town manager. Experience in management. Knowledge of government doesn't mean you have had to been in it. Familiarity with the town meeting form of government, I think that's important. A real sensitivity for the role of volunteers and how town government functions and our town government has functioned. A sense of how business works and investment works. I would want some experience or expertise, they're not necessarily the same thing, in developing, in building tax base, whether it is from the private sector, helping develop a project and know what's important to attract the investment, or from the public sector, knowing how to attract investment. And a familiarity with all the levers that exist in government to attract and retain investment, so that businesses who are here choose to expand here. That's good for tax base, good for employment, and businesses that are looking to locate someplace, look here. That's what I'll be looking for, a sensitivity to all of the town departments, an awareness of how everything does fit into everything else. The school system does fit into police and fire, right? Because issues of what are children doing or young adults doing does affect what the police might be called on to do. So an awareness of how those things fit together to help us run the town government so the quality of life is good. My philosophy is town government works best when no one knows it's there. No one knows it's there when, when the services are being delivered, when people are respected, when town meeting doesn't take 85 days.
So let's, we have about 6 minutes left, move on to a big topic. We could spend far more than 6 minutes on this, but downtown. And it's one of those, again, another one of those topics that get brought up. Where are we right now with the Malcolm and Parsons project and, the building that is the hole in the ground, so to speak, just to put it out there, and that's been in the town for almost a decade?
I want to say February 13th, we had a meeting that was devoted to the downtown for the purpose of informing the board and the public of what the status is. So from that, we learned that there was an application that was granted under the downtown redevelopment where the applicant does not have the required parking under the bylaw in order to do the project. Why that is, how that is, it's not the selectman's function to do, but it does indicate that the downtown bylaw doesn't work. So what the board has asked the redevelopment authority, and we will be contacting the planning board too, because we don't do all this in a silo, is to take a good hard look at whether or not and how to make the bylaw work. The Board of Selectmen really can't get involved in a project-by-project basis. That's not our role. We don't have any authority over it. Right. But what does it indicate? It indicates that the parking restriction is a problem because it's the parking, supposedly, that's an impediment to the development. So what do we do about that? There's another project in downtown that I understand could go up, but there's an issue with parking. Well, we can do something about that with resident parking stickers, with other things. But under the bylaw, those don't remedy the problem because the bylaw requires an easement, which is a permanent, right to use parking. The bylaw has some other problems. There's a requirement for affordable housing in each property. Well, you know what? It's quite conceivable that that makes the project unaffordable to a developer, or affects the kind of quality of the project he can do. Well, there's other things we can do. Do we want to abandon the affordability component? No, because otherwise we eat away at our affordable percentage, which then opens us up to 40B projects. But there are things we can do to create a bank so that the developer contributes and we can do the affordable housing in some other way. Those are the things that the Board of Selectmen can do. We are actively looking at acquiring the post office site. Hopefully, within a short time, we'll be able to announce what's going on with the post office for that acquisition. We've put on the town meeting warrant to acquire the Randolph Savings Bank site because that could be key for parking and some other alternatives. We've requested the Redevelopment Authority to look at a zone in the downtown, which I'll call the core, and there's a map on the town website people can look at on the core. To look at developing the post office site. We are a short ways away from getting title to the train depot. It'll either be for $1 or $175,000. And then to get that up and running and put that out for what we're going to do, whether keep it for town purposes or develop it. The State Theater, has great opportunities for it. The master plan contemplates the State Theater as an engine for economic development, so we've asked the Redevelopment Authority to look at that. The Selectmen, under our authorities, we can ask, direct, and probe town departments to do things. The reason I keep talking about the Redevelopment Authority is they have abilities to do things with the private sector and to focus development that selectmen don't have. And even if we did have the authority, there's only 5 of us, we're volunteers, and there's a way to get it done better by delegating it out. So we're focusing on those policies. There's an issue of traffic flow, which we have a civil engineer on the board, so he's looked at how to improve the traffic flow. One of my goals is to develop what's called a community compact, so we pull all these concepts together. So much of what we need to do has to be done with the assistance or approval of the state. The governor's office began this process called the community compact, which is when the community signs a deal with the state government to do things that otherwise might seem impossible. That's the way I phrase it. So I want to put together our project, and hopefully by the summer engage a community compact that unites all of these topics that require state participation to do. So by April or May, I think we'll have a deal in the post office. I think what I'd like to do is have the downtown bylaw vetted. I'd like to have us take the downtown bylaw up substantively to revise it at a fall town meeting, so we can get to that point where town government has done just what it needs to do to make it attractive to invest in the downtown. We're closer to doing all of these things than we've ever been before, and we can pull it off.
Well, with the final minute, I just like to give all the candidates an opportunity just to be able to give a pitch to voters why they should select you as one of their 2 choices for Board of Selectmen.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank all of you for the opportunity to serve the town. What I can ask you in considering me for one of your 2 votes is to look at what we've done, particularly in the past 2 months, maybe 4 months by the time you vote, in moving the town forward, in building relationships with employees, with the business community, with other boards and committees to make things work. We're paying attention to Fire Station 1. You'll see appropriations to make that facility livable, at least livable for the men and women who risk their lives to protect us. We're paying attention to staffing the police department so that we deter, detect, and prosecute effectively. To build our tax base so that anyone who is born or lives in Stoughton and has children here will make sure that those children have a good education. Those are the things I've cared about since before I got on the board, what I've been working on since I've been on the board, and what I'll continue to do if I'm privileged to receive one of your votes. Thank you.
Well, Bob, thank you for joining me, and thank you for tuning in. This has been another edition of Stoughton Spotlight. I'm Jeffrey Pickette, and you've been watching another Conversations with the Candidates. Remember to vote in the upcoming town election and to watch the other interviews with the other candidates. Again, there are 4 candidates for the Board of Selectmen this cycle, running for 2 seats on the board. Thanks for watching.